let's jump to China, the economy, and COVID. In this take, you could say I'm looking for a hot take, but
I appreciate being warned. I appreciate being warned before I launch into anything. That's good.
But I'm really trying to get I have struggled, I think, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've really struggled to get a sense as to where things are going. And I think really where things are going at the moment is just continued uncertainty. It's hard to make decisions about what is actually happening. I mean, I run a creative agency on top of this podcast with my partner. We've got staff. We were looking at moving spaces probably May, June, and I'm so thankful that we didn't. And it's just getting harder and harder to get an idea as to what the next 6 to 12 months looks like. And so we've had to be quite conservative and very risk averse in decisions that we make around the business and just life in general. So I guess I'm curious, how are you looking at the next 6 to 12 months? What's certain and uncertain to you?
Well, unfortunately, it's all uncertain. It'd be much better if it was certain. But as an investor, your job is to weigh the probabilities of what you think the future is going to look like. And I think it's important to, so often in media now, the future gets spoken about in certainties, and football's the same. You know, a player is either the best ever, going to be the best ever, or is finished. One of three things. And in reality, players are never really any of those things. They're always pretty good or pretty bad or improving or having a bad day, or, you know, this idea that everything is always an extremity is a bit alarmist. And so I guess I say that with the China situation currently and the geopolitical relations between China and the US, and Australia's been bundled into that as well. And I don't think globalisation is finished, but I think the halcyon days are potentially over, and there'll still be things manufactured in different parts of the world and distributed to other countries. But, I mean, I think there are going to be trade alliances with groups of nations, and I suspect the internet will end up getting split up between a US internet and a China internet. And we're seeing the early stages of that with what the US have done with TikTok, and we know that China's not open to companies like Facebook and Google, and essentially their internet's closed when compared to the US's. So I think that's going to grow and continue to grow, and I think Australia will trade more freely with countries like the US, Canada, maybe India, the UK.
So have you read much? Have you read much then on Kanzik? Because I've noticed that with the recent discussions around the free trade agreement with the UK, this idea of Kanzik, or Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK expanding, having a wide-ranging free trade agreement, is sort of gathering pace on Twitter.
Yeah, I haven't read extensively about it, but you can see it happening. We've obviously seen tariffs being introduced in the US against China and some other countries as well. So I think that feels like it's coming. I feel like we've even seen China in some of the stashes with Australia recently claim that Treasury wine estates were dumping wine on their market with artificially low prices. And so there feels like this whole thematic is going to continue to grow. I sort of feel like maybe some agricultural companies are more vulnerable there. You know, I'd be a bit nervous about some of the milk providers potentially, because it feels like China could get that milk and those infant formula products elsewhere. Whereas something like, if you're a copper producer, I can't see China ratcheting up the price of copper by saying we're not going to buy your copper from Australia. So there's certain industries which, even though they rely very heavily on Chinese imports, I feel have a bit more strength, because it doesn't make sense for China to cut their nose to spite their face. I guess as an Australian, I hope it just doesn't escalate more than it has to. I mean, obviously, we don't want interference in, politics from foreign countries, but I think there's a balancing act between respecting the important roles China's played with Australia as well, in terms of they're our number one trading partner by a country mile. And so there's some sort of balancing act that needs to be reached there between respecting our number one customer, but also keeping, safe Australia and Australian way of life for generations to come.
It sort of sounds like the way that you're talking about it and others have spoken about it is it's going to be, these discussions around China are going to be siloed into different areas of the supply chain, whether it's primary industries, manufacturing, wholesale trade or distribution, and there will be different impacts on different areas, and then each thing will be segmented down into different components as well, whether it's copper versus iron ore or milk versus beef, as an example. It was interesting seeing in the AFR recently. The AFR loves to stir shit up, but, talking about Chinese diplomats approaching Brazilian diplomats around ramping up and investing in iron ore deposits. So you can sort of see how that may be permeating through the supply chain. I think going back to your point about globalization, everyone keeps talking about this whole idea of localization.
Yeah.
A lot of your manufacturing and distribution is a lot closer to the base of where it gets distributed to. But we'll see. Because, just before this, I'm pretty sure a lot of the major companies in the supply chain space, mining and so forth, were over in Vietnam with the Prime Minister's office for a major event with, their diplomats talking about supply chains. So you could sort of see how, as well, it would just be easier to move a lot of what is done in China into Vietnam. So,
and I think that's likely that there will be some manufacturing move there. There'll be some stuff that goes to South Korea. There'll be some that stays in China. But I think that localization is a trend that's here to stay, but it's not appropriate for everything. There'll be also things that are just issues of national security. I think all countries are now aware that 90% of the antibiotics get manufactured in China, and that's a big security risk. And I think you'll get a lot of onshoring of antibiotics and medical products coming back to the US and to countries like Australia as well, so that if there is a hot war at some stage or something else unforeseen, that our supply chains aren't as exposed as probably what they are today.
Yeah, the idea of a primary industry may become expanded other than just milk and beef. May include the other things that you actually need to survive a hot war.